Most distribution leaders know their catalog needs serious work, but what most underestimate is why it's so hard to fix. The answer isn't necessarily technology or budget. It's that the team required to run catalog operations at scale requires a complex team of taxonomy architects, data governance managers, enrichment teams, supplier management that, frankly, almost no mid market or even enterprise distributor can afford, recruit, or retain. So, in this episode, we're going to name that resource gap for what it is. And I'm going to leave you with 3 practical ways that you can start working around it. If you're ready to grow, let's go. Welcome to Frictionless Commerce, the show for distribution and manufacturing leaders who need digital commerce to deliver on the promise. I'm your host, Matt Johnson. In each episode, we go behind the walls into the data, systems, and processes that drive success. No silver bullets, no hype. I'm here to bring clarity to digital leaders about how transformation works across the supply chain. So here's something I see in the industry quite frequently. A distributor's leadership team understands that their product data catalog is holding them back. They'll go out and they'll post job requirements for a catalog manager, and maybe they even get ambitious and they want a taxonomy architect or a data governance lead or maybe an enrichment specialist. And then nothing happens, right? Or worse, they actually hire one person and call them the catalog team and expect them to do the work of 4 or 5 specialists. Let me get real with you and describe the team that you actually need to run catalog operations at the level that digital B2B commerce demands. First of all, you need somebody who understands taxonomy and schema architecture. This is how products are classified and organized so that your customers can actually find them. You need a data governance lead who owns the rules, the gatekeeper for what goes on the website, right? What gets added to the PIM, what gets optimized, how it's classified. This is the person that is oftentimes so difficult to find in the industry. You'll also need enrichment specialists or a team of enrichment specialists to transform and translate product data from hundreds of suppliers or data feeds into a consistent standard that is competitive online. And you may also need, as a best practice, a data analyst. This is somebody who can take a look at the performance of your e-commerce site and your e-commerce catalog and prioritize continuous improvement. Now, that's obviously not one person. That is not Jill in the data office running all of this. This is impossible for one person. This is really a department. And for most mid-market and enterprise distributors, that department often just doesn't exist. I have seen countless occasions where I'm working with a distributor who does north of 500 million in revenue, even billion-dollar plus organizations who are excellent at what they do in moving product throughout the supply chain. And yet their digital supply chain is stuck because it runs through a team of 1 or 2 people. And it's no surprise that the data problem in our industry is a billion-dollar problem. All right. So the reason for this is because the talent pool for this intersection of skills is surprisingly small. You have to understand B2B. You have to understand distribution and taxonomy and schema and product data quality and e-commerce. Those people are not exactly growing on trees outside your office window. So what happens, right? What I typically see happen is teams will hire 1 or 2 generalists who essentially carry the entire function. And they know where all of the bodies are buried. They're the ones who understand taxonomy and they're filled with institutional knowledge, tribal knowledge, which I say is like the number one enemy in distribution, perhaps. But think about this, like this, and this is applies to every department: sales, customer service, warehouse, purchasing. But in product data, in e-commerce in particular, if one of them leaves, a significant chunk of that institutional knowledge walks out of the door with them. And this is a problem that, frankly, nobody talks about at conferences. It's always a technology problem, right? Everybody's trying to sell you technology. It's you need a better PIM, you need a better ecom platform, you need upgrade your ERP, right? It's not necessarily a technology gap. We have technology coming out the yin yang. What it really is a capability gap. And pretending that we can solve this by hiring another person is really how companies stay stuck for years. And that's the truth. It's what I've seen. I see teams of one or two people, or even three or four people, just absolutely buried in catalog operations. They never get through their backlog. They're continually putting out fires instead of being strategic in terms of growing and improving the customer experience online. And it's an unfortunate reality, but one that you can probably relate to if you're leading one of these teams or if you're on one of these teams. I've seen postings for this position stay open on LinkedIn for 6+ months, essentially because the role requires some PIM experience, taxonomy experience, supplier management experience. I mean, think about this. These candidates just don't exist, and they certainly don't exist in volume. So, good luck finding that right person to own your catalog operations. It is very difficult. The other thing is that if I have a team of two people managing, hundreds of thousands, if not a million plus more SKUs across hundreds of suppliers, and they're spending 80% of their time doing things like cleanup and new product introduction, because sales is demanding that they add this new product line, or their supplier partners are pressuring them to get their products on the website. They are doing nothing strategic. They are not thinking about how to actually sell, right? Isn't that the whole point of B2B e-commerce? They're not thinking about how to actually drive revenue. What they're actually doing is thinking about, how do I survive? Okay. And that's a problem. And then the other thing is, like, a key person leaves the company and and then the team later looks through what they've done. They discover that, half the taxonomy and supplier data actually lived inside that person's head. It was never documented. Of course, that creates an entire mess, and sets a team back months, if not years. And then leadership the whole time assumes that the catalog is handled, because nobody is actually escalating problems, because the team is just triaging the most visible fires. Okay, this is why you can have such incredible companies, billion-dollar companies that really, I mean, they're profitable, they're growing through mergers and acquisitions. They look great on paper, is really what they do. But when it comes to digital maturity, when it comes to digital commerce growth, it's not so pretty. Ask anybody in the B2B e-commerce industry, any of the industry experts, the consultants, even the software vendors will confess this reality, that their platform and the performance of a distributor's website is entirely dependent on the product data catalog that powers it. The operational efficiencies that are available through automated digital commerce experiences are simply not being realized. And it's time that we take this more seriously, because there is significant bottom line improvements that we will feel, our shareholders will feel, our executive teams will be able to show. Look at the investment. It is actually creating a positive return. All right. So, okay. As always, I bring you the scary truth. And My responsibility is not to sugarcoat this. My responsibility is to push back on the status quo and hopefully offer some right next steps that you can put into place. Okay. As I say often, digital commerce and B2B distribution, it's not about doing everything. It's about doing the right thing in the right order, the right way. So let's talk about that. So, my first tip is seems so simple, and yet I often see it's neglected. And that is documenting what only lives in people's heads. And with the AI tools we have today, it kind of boggles my mind that companies are still struggling with capturing that tribal knowledge, institutionalizing it, and making it readily available for whoever needs to access it, right? And putting guardrails in place so that our product catalog governance can operate in a consistent, accurate, and high performing way. So yeah, this is the first thing that you can do, and really it costs you nothing. It just takes a little bit of time, but that is that we can audit how much of your catalog intelligence is documented versus how much of it lives in someone's head. So I'm talking about things like taxonomy logic, right? How Hey, I need to add a new branch to my catalog. How do I do that? What's the naming structure? How do I approve it? How do I implement it? How do I classify products and the supplier specific rules about how to onboard new products, etc. There's also a ton of like workarounds that your team has built. Oftentimes because the PIM, maybe it can't handle a certain product type. Maybe there's some customization that needs to happen to spreadsheets before they can get loaded to a PIM or to an e-com site. These decisions that get made every single day in catalog operations about how we categorize a product and that honestly could go in three different places. If the answer is this is in Sarah's head, that's your first priority. Not because Sarah isn't great. She is. She is the rock that keeps this thing together. But because you have a single point of failure, right? Running a function that touches every product you sell. This is, it just cannot become more important, right? So this really starts with taxonomy, I would argue, documenting the classification logic and the exceptions. Then we have to map our supplier data rules. Which suppliers need the most cleanup, right? What transformations we need to apply to ensure that their unique manufacturer branded content fits into our consistency standards. And what gets rejected too, and why it might get rejected. Okay, a lot of this just happens, but this is not glamorous work. It's not exciting, but this is the kind of stuff that is the difference between a function that survives a resignation and one that doesn't. If you want to move forward in your catalog operations, you've got to get the stuff out of people's heads into a documented structure and then apply that structure with absolute discipline. All right. Tip number 2 is to separate strategy from execution. When you have a small team, the natural instinct is to have everyone do everything. I've seen this in every organization. I've seen this in every department. That usually looks like your most experienced person, the one who should be strategic, the person that should be designing your taxonomy and setting data standards and governing your catalog, is spending their day fixing titles, cleaning supplier product data, filling in missing images, enriching the product data, ensuring that it matches in multiple places. That's unfortunate, right? I'll just say that. It's unfortunate that our best people are doing so much of the catalog grunt work. They spend more time in spreadsheets and PIMs than they do guiding the organization towards digital commerce growth. Okay. So if you can't hire more people, you can still separate the work. So what does this look like? It means drawing a clear line between strategic work and production work. Strategic work is things like taxonomy design, schema, enrichment, right? Governance rules, supplier data standards. How are we governing our supplier data feeds and our data aggregator feeds and performance analysis? One thing that I see consistently is that very few e-commerce teams are connecting the dots between their catalog operations and digital growth. And this, I think, is a missed opportunity. So let me put it to you this way. Your senior person should be spending at least 60% of their time on strategy. If they're spending 80% of their time on production, you're paying for expertise that you're not using. This might mean outsourcing some production work. It might mean accepting that certain lower priority SKUs get less attention, but protecting strategic capacity is how you're going to stop running in place. And tip number 3 is to evaluate managed catalog operations. So, what do I mean by this? I would say that the third option is one that I think more distributors should honestly be considering, especially if you've been struggling with getting ahead of your catalog operations for more than a year. This is where you might need to think about what it would look like to outsource your catalog operations. So instead of trying to build your team internally, evaluate whether managed catalog operations make sense for your business. Now, the idea is very straightforward. Rather than hiring 5 specialists that you can't find, good luck finding them. Even if you decide that you're going to open up the budget for hiring more heads to your team, you are going to struggle finding these people. Trust me, I know, I've done this. So instead of trying to build the team that you wish you had, but you simply can't, consider assessing capabilities of a managed function. Taxonomy architecture, data transformation, governance, performance reporting, delivered as a service with accountability. This isn't a new concept, right? Companies have been outsourcing finance, sales, HR, IT for decades. But for some reason, catalog operations, which is just as specialized and just as critical, hasn't been treated the same way. And that's starting to change. So, in full transparency, this is exactly the model that I've been working on with my team here at Pivotry. It's called Ascend, and we're launching it at the upcoming B2B online event in Chicago. That's May 4th through the 6th. So if you're going to be at B2B Online, definitely stop by and check it out. Learn more about what we've put together. I think you'll be very excited. So, what is Ascend? Ascend is designed specifically for distributors who need catalog operations at a level they simply can't staff internally. I'm not going to turn this into a sales pitch. That's not what this show's about, but I'd be doing you a disservice if I named this problem and I didn't mention that we've built something to address it. If this is something you'd like to learn more about, you can always DM me on LinkedIn. You can email me or shoot, send a raven. I'll get your message and we'll get on the phone and talk about it. So, as we wrap up, I'll say this that the catalog operations challenge in our industry isn't going to be solved with one more hire. It's a resource problem in the market that doesn't produce the combination of skills at the volume that mid market and enterprise distributors actually need. But the good news is you're not powerless. Start by documenting what lives inside your team's heads, protect your strategic capacity, and be honest about whether building this function internally is realistic or whether a managed approach gets you there faster. If this resonated with you, connect with me on LinkedIn. I share content like this and more almost every day. And if you're finding value in the show, the best way you can say thanks to me is by sharing this with a colleague who's navigating some of these same challenges. Until next time, clarity creates momentum. This is Frictionless Commerce.